Welcome to another episode of Live with a Cork in the Road, and I'm Kelly, and I'm exploring the Southeast wine industry and interviewing the people who are really making it a place to drink wine. And today, I'm so lucky. I'm welcomed into the home of the owners of Yonah Mountain Vineyards. This is Bob and Jane Miller, and we are just having a wonderful Saturday. This is wonderful. Thank you for welcoming us here to your beautiful place. And I just wanted to know, where did this idea to start a vineyard come from? What were you doing before you planted the vines and opened this winery here in North Georgia?
Well, thank you, Kelly. Thanks for coming in and sharing with us. It's sort of a bad story. It depends on how you tell the story. I was retired in Fort Lauderdale, enjoying life, and we had the beach life, and we were doing Pilates, and I retired early from my previous career of financial services. And then Jane, my wife, says, "You're not happy. You need to be doing something different. You got to go out and do." I said, "What do you mean I'm not happy? I'm really happy here on the beach." She said, No. We need to do something. She said, "I always wanted a farm. Let's go buy a farm." I said, "A farm? You want a farm? We have enough money to be retired. You want to get a farm?" This is a true story. She goes out and buys a pair of boots and a Jeep. She said, "We got a Jeep. Now we got to get a farm." So I said, "Well, okay." So we started looking for farms, and we found this property, which was not even on the market, this 200 acres. The most beautiful farm we ever saw. Jane fell in love with the property. She felt like a spirit had come over her that this land should be ours. So we bought the land. 200 acres is a lot of land. We didn't really know how much that was. I fenced the whole thing in. It's 3.5 miles of fence.
3.5 miles?
3.5 miles of fence.
Our neighbors weren't very happy.
No, we fenced out everybody. It was sitting here as the neighborhood's backyard. It hadn't been done for 45 years. Two sisters owned the property. And they hadn't done anything to it. They were just sitting here as land. And the neighborhood had used it as their backyard. They were four-wheeling on it. They were picnicking on it. They were hunting on it. So I fence it in. Now I become the bad new owner because I fenced everybody out. I thought it was important to fence the place in so we could correct what we were doing. We had no intention of doing wine and doing a vineyard at that time.
When you bought the farm, you were not thinking vineyard?
No, it wasn't even on the radar. And a friend of mine says, "Bob, 200 acres, what are you going to do with all that?" We bought it as a land investment. Get out of the stock market, have a little real estate. He said, "What are you going to do with 200 acres? Why don't you plant some grapes?" So I didn't know anything about planting grapes. I didn't know anything about making wine. So we liked the wine that was in Napa Valley. So I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm retired. I want to make great wine. I want to make world-class wine. So we went out to Napa where we enjoyed the wine, and we hired a consulting family to work with us. They farm 1,000 acres in Napa, deal with 40 different winemakers. They have become great friends. They come out here every year. We go out there every year. And they gave us some advice on how we could really do a better job with growing world-class grapes. I tell a story. His name is Will Nord. He's pretty well known. He's a really nice family. His daughter's a geologist. She tested our soil. They had a winemaking consultant, a vineyard manager consultant. And again, they became friends. We were their little Georgia project. So they were having fun coming out to Georgia. And so the first time he came out here, Will likes to walk through the vineyards. So Jane and I and Will are walking through the vineyards, and I'm expecting some professorial words of wisdom out of this guy's mouth, all of his credentials. So Will turns to me and says, "Bob, do you realize 65% of this business is BS?" And Jane says, "Put it right in." So,
you're like, this sounds right up my alley.
But what he meant by that, if you're drinking wine and like it, it's good. If you don't like it, it's not good. And so that's how I looked at this whole thing. So when I started, I wanted one great white and one great red. I wanted to keep it simple. So our flagship red, my daughter said, "Name your first wine after the first book of the Bible, Genesis, as your beginning." So we have a red blend, like a Bordeaux blend, and that's our flagship red wine. We sell more bottles of that than anything.
I really like that blend. That's one that I've purchased when I come up here. I really think it stands out.
It is. It's our best seller.
And our flagship white is Chardonnay. We grow a really nice Chardonnay on the property. This is an interesting business because it takes years to really get started to be in a place where you can sell wine.
I was just going to ask that. So just walk me through here. You purchased the farm, and then you had advice, hey, let's plant some vines. You were testing soil, but how long of a process from purchase to wine are we talking? Was it several years?
It could be 8 to 10 years. When you plant a vine, it's 3 to 4 years before you harvest. So you have all that expense of the vine and planting, which is about $20,000 an acre, and then the labor to keep it going. And then when you harvest the grape, it's another 3 or 4 or 5 years before you have a bottle of wine to sell. So there's huge upfront money in the wine business. This will be our 10th year coming up with our anniversary, and we haven't made a profit yet. I tease my son, we would have had a profit this year, except we have solar panels, and we're the only winery in the southeast with solar panels, and that costs us a little extra money to put those in, which I'm glad we did. It's fantastic to have the solar panels, and that'll save us a lot of money down the road. So there's always these upfront costs to make it happen.
Well, vineyards are very environmentally friendly anyway. I mean, you have this beautiful, the vines, the open air, and it just seems like helping the environment in whatever way we can.
We had this guy from the University of Georgia, this PhD in pharmacy. He said, hobby with bees. And he came out here and said, I'd like to put some beehives out here. I said, sure. So he walks the property and he comes over and said, I found bee heaven. I said, bee heaven? What are you talking about? He said, there's a piece of property over there. It's got a creek on one side. It has some sour gum trees. He said, can I put up some beehives? I said, sure. He puts up 11 beehives. Corey is his name. He's nuts about honey and bee. He comes out here every week. Last week he came in and said, we have happy bees. I said, what do you mean happy bees? He said, they're not stinging anymore. They're really settled down. They're really doing a good job. He said, can I put up some more hives? So just 2 weeks ago, we now have 27 beehives. He loves our environment. It's so exciting to see a guy that's really passionate about what he's doing. So we're going to have honey. We're harvesting our honey.
It'll be Yonah Mountain Vineyards honey.
Honey, yes. We'll have about 1,000 jars of honey.
But it's a beautiful property, and things like to grow in beautiful places is what I have discovered. Grapes grow in beautiful places. But so I'm not surprised that you're expanding the agricultural side of this beautiful property that you did purchase. When was the first vintage that you had your wine? Like you're saying the Genesis, was that your first vintage, or when did you start tasting wine in the tasting room that was yours?
We bought the property in 2005. We planted our first vineyard, Chardonnay, in 2008. And we had our first wine in 2009, the Genesis, but we purchased grapes from our neighbors so we could make our wine. Because my winemaker said, it takes 7 or 8 years before you have a bottle of wine. I said, I'm going to be dead before I have my first bottle of wine. I can't wait that long. So he said, well, we'll get some wine from the neighbors and we'll blend it and we'll make our own wine so we can have Yonah wine right away.
So is the neighboring community something that you share knowledge? Like, do you share knowledge with the people around you, or how important is the community up here in North Georgia with the surrounding wineries?
It changed from when we first started. We have 6 wineries now just in White County. We are all friends. We all do things differently. We share together. If somebody's press breaks, we give them our press and some of that kind of stuff. So it's a great, great sharing community. Everybody that's in it knows what they're in it for and going through. So there's a camaraderie with the wine growing world around the world. Like when I go out to Napa and they find out I own a winery and a vineyard, they open their arms. They really, really welcome you. It's a fun thing to see.
And how often do you go out to Napa? Is it once a year still that you're doing?
We try to do once a year. I'd love to go twice a year. Our team goes out 2 or 3 times a year because we still have to purchase grapes from California. There's not enough grapes in Georgia. We have now our own estate wine, our Chardonnay, our Sauvignon Blanc. We have a red blend called Meritage. And so we have about 55% of our grapes that are ours, but we don't have enough grapes to supply all the wine that we need.
So how does that work when you go out to California and you know that these are grapes that you're going to be using? How do you judge the quality on visits like that?
Well, thanks to our consultants. They've introduced us to the better vineyard managers and owners in Napa and even north of Napa. So Eric, our son, who is our general manager, part owner, and our winemaker go out and they visit the vineyards. They talk to the vineyard managers. They taste the grapes. They look at the farming practices.
They drink the wine from the year before.
Drink the wines from the year before. That's right. And so they judge which wines, which grapes they want to buy. Then once harvest comes, they sometimes go out again, make sure the trucks are there, the refrigerated trucks, the bins, so that the harvesters can put our grapes from those rows right into the bins. They go right into our trucks, and they're shipped over 2 or 3 days. We get multiple drivers, and they're here in 3 to 4 days. So it's just like fresh.
Yeah, it's just so we pick the grapes. We have a truck at 34 degrees. We put some dry ice in with the grapes. On the more expensive grapes, we pay 2 drivers to come here in 50 hours. The grapes are anywhere from $2,500 to $10,000 a ton. We have a wine that's the first $100 bottle in the state of Georgia called Totem. that we put together 5 years ago, and it was $10,000 a ton for those grapes. So that's our most expensive grape that we buy. I would love to have 100% from us. Depending on what varietal, we cannot grow all the varietals here in Georgia. So like Pinot Noir, which we want to have, will not grow in Georgia. Their skins are too thin, it's too hot, they would split. So if you want Pinot, you got to buy it from somewhere. And we get our Pinot from Sonoma. We get some fantastic grapes, really, really succulent Pinot grapes.
But that just sounds like you're able to offer a nice variety of wines in the tasting room. So how many total, if someone comes up here and they're doing a tasting flight in your tasting room, how many wines are you currently serving?
We have 8 to 9 wines, which to me is just a little bit too many. But we try to have 4 or 5 whites and 4 or 5 reds for varietal purposes. And then sometimes people like a Malbec, and sometimes they want our greatest grape here on the property we're getting to analyze is going to be
Petit Verdot.
Petit Verdot. And
that's one of my favorites.
Really? You don't see a standalone Petit Verdot very often.
But I used to work in Virginia wine, and Virginia really figured out, especially in kind of the more like the terrain over here, the Shenandoah Valley, with the kind of the more Mountain Blue Ridge area. Petit Verdot does very well. And the winery I was at, we had a standalone Petit Verdot. We also used it in our Meritage. But right. I was curious because when I came to Georgia, I didn't see it. Mm-hmm. And I was very I thought maybe it would be a similar thing. But how do you know what grapes are going well on your property? I know you talked about early on, you had people testing the soil. Is that something that you still continually do? Or how do you know when something is not working for your land?
Well, I tell people I have no talent, but hiring good people. And so we have a vineyard manager that's phenomenal. And then we have a winemaker, Tristan from Australia. Wine world in California, you have vineyard managers that do the plants, and you have winemakers that make the wine. They don't necessarily get along. In Australia, Tristan was required to get a degree in both. He has a vinology degree and also a winemaking degree. So he has an understanding of the plants. So when he works with George, our vineyard manager, they're in sync. They're hand in hand. They are working together. And they come back and tell me that Petit Verdot, the clusters are tight. They're beautiful. And then, you can look at a beautiful grape, but it may not make a nice wine. So you have to eventually make wine from the grape to see how it's going to turn out. And we're thrilled with Petit Verdot.
We also can grow a great Chardonnay. And we have 3 varietals of Chardonnay, which Tristan is able to blend at the end after they've been fermented and aged. And our Chardonnay, our estate Chardonnay, is just world class. So the problem with a winery and vineyard is it takes years to develop the crops and the plants. So we're looking at 10 years down the road and 20 years down the road to really see what grapes are going to be best up here. And again, and I'm sure you already know this, it's the terroir, your altitude, your soil, the weather, everything comes into play. And it just takes a long time, which is why you see people that are more retired people with some money, or people that, it does take a lot of upfront investment, and you have to be able to hang in there.
Yeah, I hope I live long enough.
You gotta wait. Well, I actually had my first experience this spring. I was at a vineyard and I got to plant my first vine. Oh. Now, it took about 10 minutes to plant that one vine. And it really gave me this appreciation, okay, now it's in this little tiny vine. I had to give the vines a haircut before putting it in the soil. And it was I put it away and I'm like, grow, but see you in 10 years. You know what I mean? And so, and that was just one vine. So I appreciate that you have this. And that makes me wonder, what have you learned in this process about owning your own vineyard? Has there been a big challenge along the way? I'm sure there's numerous, but what are some lessons learned that you didn't expect when you purchased the land and planted your vineyard?
Are you answering that?
They're too many to tell.
Yes, there's a lot. First of all alcohol, as you well know, is under the direction of the TTB, Tax and Trade Bureau, from the federal government. We also have the state government, the State Department of Revenue, and the county government that has oversight over our production and growth. So those 3 places, we have to have 7 licenses before we can open and sell a bottle of wine, and that is renewed every year. So the taxes have to be paid, the licenses, etc. Then it's hard for a couple or even 3 or 4 people to harvest, make the wine, and sell the wine. You've got 3 different industries all in one. The agricultural part, the winemaking part and sales. But we've also discovered that it takes a lot of people to make a good bottle of wine. We have a great team here with our tasting room staff. We have a wedding event coordinator, an internal events coordinator, and it takes all of that. That's, I think, my biggest surprise. We have about 30 employees.
Now, are you kind of overseeing the quality? Are you still tasting? Like, how does your wine education filter into your current role?
I have several roles. I am the face of the place.
You're the energy. You're the hype man.
He's the visionary.
I'm the visionary of what we should be doing. But one thing I did from day one, and we were in our 50s, and so at the time that we did this wine business, we knew the difference between a $10 bottle of wine and an $80 bottle of wine. And when you first start off, you don't have a lot of money. You don't buy $80 bottles of wine. You don't even know the difference. So we said from day one, I want to make sure we have great wine. So what I did is I did taste tests, blind taste tests. As an example, our favorite Chardonnay is called Kistler. 30 years, we got introduced to it at Nikolai's Roof. And it was our standard for Chardonnay. So when I first started with our winemaking team, I took a bottle of Kistler. I said, make our Chardonnay like this one. He said, your standards are pretty high. I said, yeah. Can't you make it like this? He said, this is what I want. Can you make it like this? And so a story I tell on Jane, we were out in Napa when we were hiring our consulting team. We visited Kistler. It was not even open to the public. And I told Jane, I said, I'm going to get some of their soil. I'm going to test their soil alongside our soil to see what we got. We come back here, and Julie, Will Nor's daughter, our geologist, was here for 3 days. And I said, take this dirt and test it alongside our soil, see what it says. So it came back, and the words were remarkably similar.
No
Isn't
way.
that
Yes.
crazy?
So our soil is
Sonoma
world-class soil. World-class soil. That made us feel good. So I knew we had the soil. So that element was taken care of.
Like a geologist level, the soils were similar.
Similar to Sonoma Valley, where Kistler is, we knew we could grow some really good Chardonnay. So I told our consultants, I said, I want to plant some Chardonnay. She said, what clone do you want? I said, what do you mean, what clone? She said, there's 400 clones. I said, I don't know what clone I want. I said, you're the consultant. She said, well, let's do 96 and 17, and we planted 4 later. I said, okay, we got clones. She said, well, what rootstock do you want to put the clone on? I said, what does that mean? She said, there's different rootstocks. You can put the clone on, and some of the rootstocks are drought resistant or disease resistant. Yeah. So she picked out rootstock. We put the clone on. Then the nursery out in California grafted the clone under the rootstock. They put it together, and then the UPS truck showed up with our 2,300 plants. And in 2008, we planted 2,300 Chardonnay plants. Our team that Jane talked about, we have a great staff, but I have them do everything. They plant, they harvest, they prune, they cork, they bottle, they see the whole process. So when they're in the tasting room, they can say, I planted this plant over here that you're drinking the wine from.
That's amazing that you are really training kind of that younger staff that's coming in. And obviously from the winery side, it is a team effort, you know, from your planting to your processing. And I love that you guys do the tours here. When did you start doing the tours of your facilities? Was that something that other places were doing, or were you kind of the first to show like, hey, come down to see our tanks in Georgia. Let me show you how we're making Georgia wine.
We started tours from day one.
We were the first to do it.
Why not share with the public what it is that we do? It's fascinating. The world of wine is a very fascinating thing. When you tell people you own a winery or a vineyard, they brighten up, and they're interested in what that is. So why not bring them out to the farm and show them a plant, show them a tank, show them, and walk through exactly what it is that we do. And it's fascinating for people.
But the wine world it really is attractive to nerds, people that want to know a lot of language, like the soil. How can Sonoma soil be similar to Georgia soil? Well, you go back to when the earth was formed and the mountains were rising. And the Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest mountains in the planet. But look at how low and short they are now. But 250 million years ago, they were as high as Mount Everest. And so all of that soil has drifted down into the surrounding plains and areas. So, it's just fascinating. And then that's just one part. And you could talk about worldwide wines and just get really carried away. So the tours really, really help educate people about wine, make it less formidable, less people are scared that they don't know enough about wine. And like Bob says, usually it's just, what do you like to drink? That's all you need to know. But you started it from day one. And
it's just something that I enjoy doing, and I enjoy sharing what it is that we have. And people are interested. They're interested.
What kind of questions are people asking when they're on the tours?
One of the purposes for me in doing the tour is to show them that we have done something pretty special here. We didn't just throw together a bunch of grapes and make some wine. Let me show you the details in which we do some of this. Our new Genesis, my daughter said, name it after the first book of the Bible is your beginning, and we put a number with it every year. So we just came out with Genesis 9, which you need to taste today, by the way.
Yes, I will be going to taste this. Yes.
And so I met with a winemaking team. So there's 5 varietals in Genesis. It's the Bordeaux blend. So what the winemaking team does, they take each of the varietals with the barrels. So we have 40 barrels of Cabernet Sauvignon. So they go and taste all 40 barrels, and they do what's called barrel select. They pick the very best 15 because every barrel is different. It's a living, breathing organism. Some taste different than others, so they pick the best 15. Then they go to Merlot, and they take the 15 barrels that we have in Merlot, and they pick the top 8. They do the same with Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, and Malbec. So they have 5 varietals, barrel selected. These are the best tasting barrels that we have. Then they take out of those barrels, and they do what's called blending. And you take a certain percent of each of those varietals, like 50% of a Cabernet Sauvignon, 20% of Merlot, 10% of Cab Franc. And I went into the tasting room downstairs. They had 80 different tastes of wine that they had blended.
Little tiny tasting
cups. And they were tasting these wines for 2 days to try out, see which blend made the best Genesis 9. And then when they get all done, they bring to us 2 of those blends. They say, these are the 2 we think are the best. They bring them to us for us to taste to see what do you think. And that process creates phenomenal wine.
That sounds like a really fun day at the office. That sounds really fun. I remember doing those days we did a Meritage blend at the winery in Virginia where I was working. And there were days where I would have these vials of scoring individual barrels and trying to have these nuances. So it's a fun day, but it's very serious. And I think it gives you the artistic side that you are, when you taste that final blend, that your team collectively said, these were our best barrels. This is our favorite blend that year, for that year, for that. It changes. And I guess that leads me to what I'm thinking for Yonah, because you are part of a growing Georgia wine scene. There's now 2 AVAs here in Georgia, which is fantastic. The one that's just in Georgia. So you're part of that, but what do you want Yonah to be known for? What stands you guys apart from other neighboring places? What would you say is your thing?
Well, one thing I did want to make the best wine we possibly could. As an example, we use French oak barrels. A lot of people use American oak. We did a test 9 years ago between the flavors that came out of the 2 barrels. American oak barrels are $300 a barrel. French oak barrels are $1,200 a barrel. I put all the money in the wine, whatever it costs. Trying to put together the best wine. So I do blind taste tests every week with my winemaking team. I'll go down and get a $400 bottle of wine. Let's put this next to Genesis. And a lot of people in the wineries do what they call have house palate. All they do is drink their own wines. And we don't do that. We do, in fact, once a month, I do blind taste tests with the public. I invite them to come do that with us.
Now, are you blind tasting against other Georgia wines, or are you saying other world regions?
World region.
So not comparing to your neighbors, it's comparing to standards across the world.
Right. We're going to a standard that's the standard of the world. I want to see how good we can really be. And so we go against some of the best wines in my world of what I think are the best wines.
Do you think that you compare yourself to any certain region?
We are similar to Napa and Sonoma. We make our wines that way, as I give our winemaking team the examples, which happens to be the big red, bold reds, and then the very crisp, clean Chardonnays. So that's our reference that we go to.
How many wines are you producing? How many cases? What's your case production right now?
Last year we did 2,300 cases. We'll do 3,000 this year. We'll do 4,000 next year. My goal when we started was 5,000 cases. Today, small, stay a boutique winery, make sure our quality is there, and provide a product that people can be excited about. There's a bad reputation for Georgia wine in a lot of circles. People think, Georgia wine? Why would you want to drink Georgia wine? I went to a restaurant owner one time. I said, I own a winery. I have some wine here. Would you like to taste my wine? She said, well, I can't drink reds. I said, well, here, guess what, this Chardonnay. So she drank the Chardonnay. Long story short, 4 hours later, she bought our lunch. She drank 4 glasses of Genesis. She brought 4 cases of our wine. So those are the home runs when people see that we have something different and something special. I did a blind taste test 7 weeks ago with our totem. So we had 11 people in the tasting. We did it blind, A, B, just tasted it. And we voted, which one do you like better? 7 out of the 11 thought our wine was better.
No way.
Yes. So we win about 70% of those taste tests.
See, blind tasting really gets people just strip it down to your senses, no judgment, no known. I was just at a tasting this spring in Virginia, and a Virginia wine fooled everybody. It was a Virginia Pinot Noir, and there were a bunch of professionals in the room, and I would say about 60% thought it was a Burgundy. And I think those are really when you get the honest feedback. Exactly. I'm not saying that the quality is always going to be the same, but you'll get the feedback of people's taste preferences and what their styles are.
Several months ago, we had 2 couples come into our winery in our tasting room from Napa. They had this look on their face like, what is this? I can't even believe I'm here. My cousin brought me. I don't want to be here. So they started tasting our wine. They liked the Chardonnay. They liked the Genesis. They bought 2 bottles of Totem. So they came in with attitude and left with a nice stuff.
So you changed their mind.
Well, I think our pie in the sky goal for doing all of this is to show that Georgia can be as good as any place in the world. For better or for worse, we can compete, and it's just going to take time.
And you guys are part of it. How much do you think that the marketing side and like your advertising is important right now to get there? I mean, the wine will drive itself. People will hear about the quality of wine. But when it comes to kind of a national recognition, like, does social media really help you guys? How are you broadcasting the messages that you want people to hear about your wine?
We have a good team that really does a lot of social media.
Eric, our son, has really opened up the social media world to us. We didn't know much about it. And he and our marketing director are definitely using all of that. We do have to put ads in the local newspaper and some magazines, but the percentages are shrinking where social media can just take off. And then we do try to have a lot of attractions. We have our spring celebration where we introduce the new wines for the year. We have a fundraising race here through the Vineyard and trail race, and all the proceeds benefit the free clinic in Cleveland for people that can't afford their medical care. In the fall, harvest time, we have Crush Fest, and it's a big, we get about 3,000 people coming here for the one-day festival. We have about 40 artists and craftspeople showing 12 musical acts on 3 stages. Helicopter rides. I mean, it's a big
bouncy
deal.
House for the kids.
Right. It's very family-friendly, and it does get people up here, and it's...
I think our main advertisement is one person at a time. When someone comes, they're surprised that this happens every day. People tell me, I can't believe how good your wines are. I wasn't expecting this. A friend of mine is a professional testifier in court. He was doing a deposition here in Georgia, and this high-powered lawyer flew in from Houston, Texas, and he was a big wine guy. John says, I got a friend that owns a winery. Would you like to see a Georgia winery? The guy says, why would I want to see a Georgia winery? I drink good wine. I don't want to go see a Georgia winery. John says, no, that's a friend of mine. So he reluctantly gets in the car. They come over here. They go down to the taste room tasting. John calls me. I'm sitting up here, and he said, would you like to meet this guy? I said, yeah, I'd love to meet him. So I come down. He's tasting all of our wines. I said, what do you think? He said, I'll buy a case of each.
That's super exciting. I think that's really cool. Changing minds 1% at a time about Georgia wine. So how can people find out more about you guys and events coming up? Is a website? Do you follow on Instagram? What do you suggest for people from Atlanta to get up here to see your place?
All of the above. We have a great website, YonahMountainVineyards.com. We're on Instagram, Facebook. You can look up Yonah events if you're thinking about a vineyard wedding. It's a beautiful spot to get married. We have several sites on the farm that you can get married outside in the vineyard. And then we have a 10,000 square foot event facility, and we can seat 450 people easily for your wedding.
Well, this is really fun. I really hope people it's just a little over an hour. I packed up the car this morning, got some coffee, and before I knew it, I was in beautiful Yonah Mountain Vineyard area. So I highly suggest people from Atlanta come up and take a chance and try your wines, and then spread the good word about Georgia. So thank you so much for your time today, you guys.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Yeah,
Cheers.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.